couple of weeks ago, I ran my fastest marathon to date. I ran 2 hours, 25 minutes and 47 seconds at the Berlin Marathon. I finished 15th. That time puts me 9th on the UK all-time list, and it was only my 4th marathon. 4 marathons in a row, by the way, where I've managed to run a PB. That's pretty sick. It was such a huge high, and I absolutely exceeded my expectations. We were going for 2:27, and to finish with a 2:25 next to my name was incredible. What happens now? I've just run the Olympic qualifying time for this year's Olympics. My big goal is to make it to LA in 2028, and who knows what the qualifying time will be by then, so I probably need to get faster. I need to keep running marathons, but what do I actually do between now and then? How am I gonna get there? And how do you bring yourself back from such a high like that, which normally for me anyway is followed by a little bit of a low, because you're always going to crash after the high of that performance and all the celebrations that follow after it. How do you get yourself back into training and figure out what is immediately next? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about today. I am easing myself back into training. I'm really big on taking recovery seriously. I took 2 weeks of super easy running. I think the first week straight after the marathon. I didn't run for 3 days, and then I ran a grand total of 10 miles that week. So really baby, tiny weeny, eeny weeny little runs, just to keep my tendons happy and to make sure that conditioning is staying in the legs. The week after that, I ran 30 miles, just going out for little easy jogs, and this week, I'll probably hit somewhere between 50 and 60, which is still nowhere near my max, 108 miles I hit in the peak of the marathon block. I'm probably gonna have lost some fitness by the time I get back to my first little baby workout next week, and that's okay. Detraining and recovering from a big effort and a big training block like that is so important to get you ready for the next one. And I'm so motivated for that. I'm so excited to get back into things, to start building that fitness and start laying the groundwork for that next marathon. I said leading into the Berlin Marathon that aside from the time and what I get at the finish, my biggest goal for that race was to finish immediately excited to do another marathon, and we've absolutely smashed that goal out of the park. I'm so excited to do another one, but we got work to do first. So I'm gonna go for my run, and I'm gonna take you through what is next, and I'm also gonna answer some of your questions, because a lot of you have questions about this recovery period. How do you decide what's next? How do you plan where you go from here? So we're gonna get into that. But before I go for my run, it's someone's birthday today.
Happy birthday, me.
He's 40 today.
Yeah.
Isn't that exciting? That's where all those greys are. How do you feel?
Old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's actually only 28.
I'm only 28. I'm not that old. And what are we doing for my birthday?
Nothing. I'm going for a run. Bit gross. It's so drizzly outside. It's like we skipped the summer. Obviously we had a lovely summer in Flagstaff training out there for the marathon, but we skipped the British summer and we've come back to perpetual autumn winter. It's grey, it's rainy, it's cold, it's a little bit miserable, but if you bring a good attitude, which I'm trying to do, it's not too bad. I'm being very intuitive with my training at the moment because it is just easing back in and easy runs. So my coach is giving me a mileage goal for the week, and it's always a range, and I just kind of float around within that depending on how my body feels. I did 8.5 miles today, easy, with 6 20-second strides thrown in at the end. And that's my first little injection of a little bit of pace, just to get the legs moving over and to test things out really before we do my first workout. And let's just say I felt rusty. My first stride was slower than marathon pace. I think I ran about 6-minute miling, but I took with me, sorry, the dishwasher is gargling.
How rude.
I took with me for the remainder of those strides some advice I had from a good friend of mine, Kieran McGeehan.
Me!
Which was, when something's not feeling good or you're not loving it, think of one physical, very small thing to focus on for every single rep or the rest of, the run. So for each stride, I thought of one different thing to focus on. Shoulders back, driving the arms, being on my toes, driving the knees, getting the legs down as fast as I could. Each stride, I thought of something different, and I got faster every single one, and it felt a little bit better. So it's the little things. And in a minute, I'm gonna work through some of your questions about recovering from a marathon, easing back into training, before talking about what's next, which is so exciting, but it's far, far in the future, and I've got to get fit again first. I can't wait to share that with you. But first, going from little things to quite a big thing, Daniel's birthday present has arrived, and I need to set it up. And it may or may not be a coffee machine. I went so over budget, but it's the only thing I could think of that he wants. So I'm gonna try and set it up and make him a coffee before he gets back. He sent some ground coffee with it. That's so nice. Classic manual espresso machine. I ran out of battery, but coffee machine, great success. Daniel's figuring out how to use it, and it looks really cool. Wanna see? You need to turn the coffee machine off. I've just been talking with Daniel about my plans for what's next, because obviously it's going in this video later on, and we're also planning those plans for the next few months. And I am so excited about what I have coming up, and I think that is just something you can't take for granted in this sport. And when you're doing it as your job, which is kind of what I'm doing now, which is crazy to think. I'm so, so lucky, and I just feel so grateful that I find it so exciting what I'm working towards and these goals I have and these races that I'm gonna be doing. And I can't wait to share it with you. Which reminds me, if you're here for the journey and you're not yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button and click the little bell icon next to the subscribe button, because then you'll get notified when we release new videos, so you'll never miss out. And no one wants to be missing out. Before we get on to what's next though, I promised I would answer some of your questions about recovering from a marathon, easing back into training from a marathon, how I do it, and maybe if there's any advice or tips that I can share with you guys on how to do that, because it's difficult. Sometimes there's not quite a manual out there for it, and for good reason, because everyone is so different, and also every marathon is so different. I've eased back into training in different ways after each marathon I've done, because my body has needed different things from me. So here's all of your questions. The ones about what's next for me, I will save until the later on section of the video. There's some really exciting, good questions in there about that, so thank you. So to kick us off, this person has asked, how long does it take you to build back up your mileage after a marathon? So I sort of outlined what I'd done the last few weeks and what's coming up a little bit at the start of this video, but it really depends. I will be doing my first proper workout roughly a month after race day, and my mileage at that point still won't look the same as my max mileage in a marathon block. Equally, I'm not in a marathon block right now, so what am I comparing to? Probably not marathon block mileage, but maybe residual normal mileage outside of a marathon block, which for me at the moment is probably like 80 to 90 miles, and I'd say it's probably going to take me about 6 to 7 weeks post race day to get back to that volume. And it's a gradual increase, but that's not to say that it should be 6 to 7 weeks. It might take you 8 weeks, it might take you 4, depending on where your mileage is at and how achievable that feels based on how your body is feeling is what I would say you should be guided by. It's a little bit annoying because you can't list it out and completely stick to week by week mileage if you want to kind of know what's coming up, but being informed by what your body is telling you is the best way to do it, because you're going to come off a marathon either feeling good or feeling awful or feeling somewhere in between, and that can always change. This is another great question, and I think it's one that a lot of us struggle with after a big goal like a marathon. Please tell us how you pick up the grind again. I also ran Berlin, it was my first marathon, and now I'm lost. I feel you. There's gonna be a little bit of a lull in your motivation because all you've been thinking about and working towards has been this one race, and now that one race has finished. So my best piece of advice might not necessarily be something you can act on now in this moment, but in the future, when you have that goal and you're working towards that marathon, have an idea of what's next. It doesn't have to be set in stone, you don't have to be entered into those races, but have a bit of a roadmap into what your options can be. For me, I thought I was gonna do a cross-country season after this marathon and ease into that, and that was my rough idea of what was immediately next, so I knew kind of that I'd be preparing for something. That would be my first tip. And secondly, I'd say accept that you're gonna feel a bit of a lull and a bit of a dip in motivation. You're probably gonna lose some fitness from that recovery time, which is important, it's good. It doesn't necessarily make you feel good, so look for the things that motivated you originally, whether that's picking a new goal or reconnecting with the reasons you fell in love with running, socializing with people and going for group runs, finding new routes that excite you. Pepper your routine with those things that motivate you and excite you again, and slowly your fitness will build, and hopefully that love for the grind will come back. And if you can tell, but it's slowly but surely getting dark, and I'm trying to move around the house to keep this fun, but I'm losing the light. This person has said, curious, let's say you don't have a race for 6 months, how do you structure your training? Firstly, you don't have to have 6 months without a race. If that's a choice and that's what you want to do, then fine. You gotta get your head around how you're gonna structure your training. Sure, if it's a marathon, maybe it does take you 6 months to train for it, and that training is just gradually ramping up. If you want a period without racing, then it's about finding the right routine that's gonna maintain your fitness and still keep you dialed in and enjoying that training without a goal close in sight. I personally prefer having races a bit closer together than that. Let's say my big goal is 6 months away and it's a marathon. I'd like to have a half marathon maybe 2 months out, and then maybe a 5K and a 10K on the way there, so that they're smaller goals getting me to that half marathon and that marathon, and also keeping me dialed in and committed to training, knowing that, oh, I've got a race in 6 weeks, I need to be ready for that, and that's getting me ready for the race after that and the race after that. And that way you can also periodize your training. So if it's ramping up to a longer distance, your training will get more tailored to that endurance event and that longer style training the closer you get to that race. What does base training post-marathon actually look like? That's a great question. The way I'm gonna look at this is the closer you get to the race, the more specific your training is, and the further away from the race, the more basic your training is. So coming off a big race and easing back into training, that looks like a lot of recovery, easing into easy runs, and getting used to that volume and that mileage again. Once you've got your volume up, you can then start introducing sessions, but they're not gonna be super specific. We're not doing marathon pace reps, we're not doing super fast intervals. It's a lot more basic, where that term base training comes in. For me, my first little session is gonna be a little baby fartlek, which will be reps that are defined by being faster, and then recovery that's a jog. There's gonna be no pace expectations on there. It's gonna be about an effort, putting out an 8 out of 10 of effort, which on an undulating route might be slower than marathon pace, even if I'm only maintaining that for 5 minutes. It looks like a lot of threshold, a lot of tempo, and a lot of just getting the work done, but not looking at honing in on any specific paces or speediness. And I have a cat behind me, which is getting into my kit drop. Utrecht, that is my on kit drop. I haven't even opened that yet and tried on those clothes, okay? I know you're excited. I'll try them on later and I'll show you. Base training is really about increasing your fitness so that you're ready to then take on more specific training. It's not about getting race sharp. You're building that aerobic engine, you're running more and getting that volume up, but it's not top level of the cheesecake, if you like. It's the buttery biscuit base.
I like the base. I like the buttery biscuit base.
This person said, I just PB'd in Berlin as well. How do you work out what a realistic next goal should be? Firstly, I don't think realistic should be the first thing you think of, because your goals should be scary, and maybe you should think that they're even a little bit unachievable, because those are the ones that are probably going to be the most exciting. In my opinion, I think this is one that a lot of people struggle with, and you might just go to the next round number because that seems like the easiest thing to do. Let's say you've just run a 3:25, perhaps going for 3:20 seems the next obvious thing, but I'd encourage you to come back to thinking about what excites you and what an exciting goal is going to be, because that is going to stand the test of time through a training block in the tough moments as well as the good moments. So think about what would be really exciting to you. Maybe it's running 3 marathons in 6 months, or running a marathon that sounds a lot more challenging than the last ones you've done, perhaps a hilly marathon. It doesn't have to always be a time. And if you are looking for a time goal and you want it to be realistic, perhaps look at what you've done in the past and what those chunks have been that you've taken off. If you've taken off 2 minutes from the last marathon, perhaps 3 or 4 minutes is realistic and still is going to be stretching, but is going to be also exciting because it seems a hard enough goal to go for. I don't think there's a right or wrong in this kind of goal setting, and if your goal is a lot harder, then the way of being realistic with it might be telling yourself that it might take more than one attempt, and that's okay. I would always encourage you to come back to what you find exciting, and these goals being your goals rather than being the obvious next time or what everyone else is going for. Right then, so what's next? As many of you know, a huge dream of mine is to become an Olympian, and to be honest, I have gained a lot of confidence from that performance in Berlin to say truly and honestly, I'm shooting for that 2028 Olympic Games in LA. Is that going to be easy? No. It's going to be very difficult. And a lot of you have questions specifically regarding the Olympics, so let's tick those ones off first. When would you have to start planning for LA 2028? Like, when do you need to qualify? That's a great question, and in the specifics, I don't know. I can speak generally and say that for LA 2028, I'm probably going to be looking to qualify late 2027 or early 2028. Historically, that's what British athletics have required, that you run a marathon that qualifies you, in the winter before the Olympic year or in the spring of the Olympic year, because you've got to go and run another marathon if you qualify for the Olympics in the summer of that year. So it needs to be far enough out that you can then recover from it. So that's been the kind of window of qualification in the past. But in terms of the time I need to run, we're not going to know that until they release the selection policy, which is likely to be about a year before the Olympics at some point in 2027. But in terms of planning to qualify, that has already started. Every Olympic cycle is 4 years long, and everything you're thinking about within that 4 years is geared towards qualifying for the Olympics. It's the same as when I was talking earlier about having a big goal and working backwards from it. The next 4 years is all about making LA 2028. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to be in a GB vest or aiming to be in a GB vest between now and then. It just means that everything I do effectively has to fall into this timeline that aligns with qualifying for the Olympics in the marathon in 2028. So in terms of what that road to the Olympics looks like, the next year is the most clear. The year after that depends on how the next year goes, and you make decisions along the way, but it'll look something like me doing at least a marathon a year to try and hone that experience, get to know the event better, and prepare myself as best I can to run that qualifying time and to qualify, and then to perform as well as I can at the Olympics. And I think exposure to the race, running different types of marathon races, from paced time trial races to tactical races, maybe even some hilly races, gaining that experience, gaining that exposure to become a better marathon runner is essentially what I need to do. And there will be other races peppered in there as well that will, be a part of the goals backwards from each marathon that I do in that time span, but that is the long and short of it. Just a bunch more marathons in the next 4 years. That's it. Easy. And a lot of you are clearly very observant and have realized that I had a pretty good time whilst I was in Flagstaff, and Daniel too. We really enjoyed ourselves while we were out there for this 10-week stint, spending more time with my coach John and also with my training partners and our friends out in Flagstaff. And a lot of you have asked whether we're going to be moving to Flagstaff or would like to pursue being there permanently. Yes, I would love to move to Flagstaff. We would love to move to Flagstaff, but it is just not that simple. We are looking into it and figuring out if that is something that we are even able to pursue. And if we can, we will make it happen. But having moved house from the south of England to barely the north of England, and that being stressful enough, we will have to prepare for some serious stress if that happens. But hey, it would be seriously worth it because that would be sick. Now, I can't remember if I mentioned it in one of my pre-race videos at all, but originally, pre-Berlin, my plan was to obviously rest and recover and then get myself stuck into a good old cross-country season before then maybe doing a half on the roads and easing back into a track season before doing an autumn marathon again next year. So plans in theory sometimes change in practice, and we really smashed that goal of being excited to run another marathon after finishing Berlin. So I have slightly changed my plans. Will I be doing any cross country over the winter months? Sadly not, guys. With the change of plans, cross country has got the boot and I have bigger fish to fry. And my bigger fish to fry comes in the form of running a marathon a little bit sooner than next autumn. A lot of you have been asking when my next marathon is and also what marathons I want to run. Do I want to complete all 6 world majors? Yeah. In my lifetime, 100%. It might be 7 by the time I finish because they're talking about adding another world major. I am gonna run a marathon in the spring. Which marathon? Not confirmed yet, but I am too excited to do another marathon to wait until the autumn. And there are some opportunities that mean that running one in the spring could open doors for me, which is really exciting. Doors like maybe running in a Great Britain vest again next year. That would be pretty sick. And that's one of my big goals for next year, to get myself back in a GB vest. And hey, wouldn't it be really cool to get my first GB vest on the roads? I haven't run for my country in a while. I ran for England at the Copenhagen Marathon last year, and I ran for Great Britain on the track 2 years ago over the 10,000 meters. So I think it's time that I got myself back in a national vest, repping the red, white, and blue, and it would be really cool to run on the roads for my country for the first time. So am I gonna try and make the team for the 2025 World Champs, the standard for which is 2:23:30? Yeah, I'm gonna give myself the best shot of making that team and going to the World Championships in Tokyo, because I have the confidence to go for it now. And if I don't shoot my shot and see if I can make that team or how close I can get to that time, then I think I would really regret it. So I need to run a marathon in the spring because the World Championships is in September. There is also the World Road Running Championships at the end of September, where there is a half marathon as well. So that's another avenue that I can look down, which is why I'm going to run a half marathon in the next marathon block so that I can try and get the half marathon World Championships qualifying time and the marathon World Championships qualifying time. And I'm doubling my chances, if you like, of getting in that GB vest. And I think running a fast half will also help my marathon time to come down, because I ran a half marathon PB in the second half of the marathon, if you didn't hear. So I think there's some time to take off there as well, which is super exciting. Will I be running on the track next year? I did a short but great track season this year. Thank you, I did, yes. But unfortunately, as much as it pains me, I love running on the track, and track racing is so fun. You can do back-to-back races and dabble in different distances. I really enjoy it, and my time on the track is not finished, but unfortunately, it's looking unlikely next year, because if I run a spring marathon, I'm then going to be recovering from that marathon and hopefully then gearing up for a World Championships, whether that's in the marathon or the half, or, you know, plan C might be to run a marathon around that time of year anyway. So it's looking like my track spikes are hung up for the time being, but not permanently. All right, before I tell you what my next race is going to be, because it's not going to be the half marathon that I'm going to do, and it's not going to be the marathon that I'm going to do in the spring, I have a race penciled in before then. But I have a couple of fun questions that people have asked me. When merch? Very straight to the point. Some questions about when t-shirts and vests are going to be available again, or if they are, and we have put an order in, guys. Merch is gonna be here. It's being made currently, and hopefully it's gonna arrive in the next few weeks in time for you to order your Christmas presents, or for Santa to get in touch with us and let us know that he wants to put an order in for people that have got it on their Christmas list. So stay tuned, watch this space. We are going to have vests and t-shirts with the Love the Grind on the back and the PB Run Club logo on the front back in stock very soon. Brandenburg Gate tattoo after Berlin Marathon PB. That's a great idea. And I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but I actually get a tattoo for each marathon I run after the marathon. I have my little Seville orange stamp for my first marathon in Seville. I have my Danish pastry for Copenhagen and my homicidal cow cat for Houston, obviously. I'm a little bit stuck for Berlin. I think the Brandenburg Gate is a great symbol, and maybe I could get like a line drawing of that to fit in with the designs of my other tattoos. I've also thought about the Berlin Bear. I want it to be something that's a little bit fun, but also that has a nod to the experience I had in Berlin, not just Berlin as a city. So if any of you have any ideas for my Berlin Marathon tat, leave them in the comment section below. Someone has also asked when I will have coaching slots open again. Watch this space. I am working on my coaching business at the moment and kind of restructuring a few things so that I will hopefully have some opportunities for you guys to work with me in the near future. But it's one of the things on the list of things we're working on. And we're quite busy with training, the merch business, YouTube, Instagram, coaching. It's a lot. So be patient with me. You will be the first to know, I promise. Next question. Will you change anything in your next marathon build, and will you continue to work with your current coach? Yes, I will be working with Coach John for the foreseeable. It worked really well in the last block, and I have and had no plans of changing that straight after this marathon block, no matter how it went, because I think working with a coach is such a process. And I think you have to buy into it for a minimum length of time of probably 6 to 12 months before deciding it's not working for you, if that's the camp you're in. I'm pretty firm in my belief that this is a really good setup for me and it is working for me, so that's not going to change. In terms of will I change anything, not any big changes. I honestly think if I repeated everything I did in the Berlin block and just did it better because I have more experience and I'd be doing it for the second time, we would come away with a better result. I think the mileage is going to be something that I continue to push gently upwards, and I think I'm going to take into this next block my newfound confidence, which is going to be a change in itself in how I approach the training and how I feel I'm able to push myself. So I think building on that and taking care of the little things is the main goal, which isn't much of a change at all. It's going to be going back to altitude, doing the same sessions, doing the same hard graft, and loving the grind in the process. It worked pretty well this time, so don't change what's not broken. Don't try to fix what doesn't need fixing. That's how they say it. When is your next stint at altitude? The plan, although nothing is booked yet, is to go back mid to late January to Flagstaff and train for the next marathon. And it will be a very similar kind of timescale to Berlin, roughly 10 weeks in Flagstaff, and then dropping down either straight into the race or with that 2.5 week gap again. And that will depend on what marathon I do. If I'm doing a marathon in Europe, then I will come home 2.5 weeks before. If I stay in America, then I can probably drop straight down within 2 days. So that's all dependent on which marathon I commit to at the moment. But Flagstaff, end of January, February, March, until who knows when. All right. I'll tell you my next race. Jeez. I'm going to be in base training, easing back into things and getting stuck into setting up a really good routine at home and getting back into the grind for the next 2 months before doing my first race back, which is going to be the Telford 10K. I've done it before twice, I think. It's a great 10K, it's flat, it's fast, it sells out every year. The only thing I don't like about it is with it being a 2-lapped course, you go around this hairpin bend that's basically a cone twice, which is a little bit annoying and it slows you down. I think you lose a few seconds. But I've run my PB there before, and before Trafford earlier this year, that's where my 10K PB was from. So good omens there. I'm looking forward to doing that. I'll then be gearing up for a half marathon and heading into my next marathon block, which I just can't contain my excitement for. I am really excited about it, and the marathons that we're looking at as contenders are all extremely exciting. It's gonna be Yeah. So much fun! Just gotta spread that joy and excitement out over the next 6 months rather than using it all up now and then not having any of that later down the line, because it's gonna be really important. Some of this winter training is gonna suck, especially the stuff that I do on my own before I get to Flagstaff, which is for the next 3 months-ish. Yeah, that's a while. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, love the grind.